I am honored to preach on this occasion for the Detroit Presbytery's Martin Luther King Jr. service. My thanks to the planning team and to Deborah Fair for introducing me. I bring you greetings of joy and justice from Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, where I am in my third year as president. I fondly remember my visit to Detroit last February, visiting with members of the Presbytery and the Black Caucus, and with Diane and Bob Agnew, who serve on the President's Roundtable at Louisville Seminary. It is good to be with you. My message for today is entitled, The Measure of Our Lives. More than 50 years have passed since the dreamer went to sleep. In the words of the famed poet Herbert Woodward Martin, nothing has changed. We have slipped backward. A good deal has changed. We are moving forward. Somewhere between these poetic assertions, these lyric observations, these polar extremes, lies the sobering truth about the state of our national progress in affirming Black life in our own day and time. The year was 1968. I was younger then, and coming into my own, at least to my mind. I was assertive and restless, an adolescent, a man-child with aspirations of full manhood. I was young, gifted, and Black, and already moving to ever deeper levels of self-awareness, emotional maturity, and communal identity by the images I saw of children and adults who looked just like me that were coming from the Deep South and from other places every day on television, in the newspaper, and in magazines. It was a beautiful sight, this Black-led, freedom-loving, justice-obsessed, God-intoxicated movement for the transformation of a people and a nation. The sea of racial solidarity and self-determination seemed endless and without bounds to me. There were church workers, youth workers, domestic workers, and retired workers, farm workers, blue-collar workers, and bone-weary workers, female and male workers, anti-poverty and anti-war workers, the mistreated, exploited, and abused of African America were all on prominent display. Among the swelling numbers of insurgents were young Black women and men with their fists marvelously raised in the Black Power salute. Of all the images from 1968, it is Memphis, Tennessee that I remember best. The sanitation workers with their endless procession of signs, posters, and placards written in bold Black letters, held chest high, displayed in single file, which message eloquently declared, "I am a man." I was sitting in the living room watching television with our family when the transformation began, a kind of spiritual and cultural metanoia of sorts, when I started to put away childish things. I don't remember much about TV that night, but only the breaking news that forever and irrevocably altered the life of a nation and my own. It was just after 6 p.m. Martin Luther King Jr., the announcer said, at 39 years old, was dead. This is the season we commemorate Martin's birthday, January 15th, 1929. Always, the vivid day for me will be April 4th, 1968. A major Tet offensive was just beginning in Vietnam, and the Democrat Lyndon Baines Johnson and the Republican Richard Milhous Nixon were running for president of the United States. Aspirations of the nation's Apollo space program were contrasted by an escalation in civil unrest born of racism, sexism, militarism, and materialism. Support for the Black Panther Party for self-defense was surging across Black America. 32 African nations intended to boycott the Mexico City Olympics in response to the International Olympic Committee's initial decision to allow the participation of apartheid South Africa. The Martin Luther King and Marion Wright Edelman-led Poor People's Campaign for dignity, jobs, health care, and decent homes loomed on the horizon. And then there was Memphis. King leaned over the balcony of the second floor of the Lorraine Motel, just outside the room he always stayed in when he came to Memphis, to ask the musician slated to play for that evening's mass meeting to be sure to play his song. Be sure to play Precious Lord, Brother Branch. Be sure to play it real pretty. King's mood that night was somber. He had always drawn strength from the music, from the songs of his people that helped shape him, prepare him for what might lie ahead. He intuitively understood the traditional African proverb, the spirit will not descend without a song. It was as he straightened up that martyrdom came. The metal-jacketed bullet exited the rifle's chamber. The assassin's shot found its target with ungodly accuracy and deadly speed. King fell, never to rise again in this world, at least not under his own power. A grief-stricken silence hung over our house in those days, as if a member of our own family had died. To be sure, one had. In the waning hours of April 4th, someone was heard to say, "My God, what a way to die." Someone was later and more profoundly heard to say, "What a way to live." As I look at the United States today, I cannot help but wonder if perhaps we as a society have chosen not to live. We are being sore tested right now for life, good life, healthy life, the life of e pluribus unum, which is our sacred trust held in common, requires a rich embrace of difference, a genuine commitment to inclusion, a principled system of government, a participatory democracy, and true justice for all of God's children. By the end of his sojourn with us, King had diagnosed a multitude of illnesses afflicting the American body politic and undermining its general health. He called America an extremely sick nation. He challenged our identities born of exclusion and hate, our supremacies of race, religion, wealth, nationality, and today we would add gender and sexual violence, and our wanton disregard for the environment. Scriptures the world over have noted the infinite and ennobling measure of human life, the way that in our text from Luke today says, if you really want to save your life, you must first give it away. We ask ourselves the question, as individuals, as people of faith, and as a nation, are we moving in the direction of life? Whoever gives up the exclusive prerogative on their own life, is willing to be fully present for others, heeds the call to conscience, and fights with courage and conviction, they will know life. This is an inviolable and sacred truth that makes possible the keeping of that which one gives away. And so the man whose life we remember today looked at us, looked at all our households of faith, looked at his country, and saw that the way of life we had chosen was leading us down the road to perdition. King challenged us to move ever more deeply into the darkly radiant depths of ourselves, to emerge from the fathoms, and to move courageously toward the creating of a new society, a new humanity, a new world. By the end of this mortal frame, King had already moved decades beyond where we would place him, beyond racially segregated worship and integrated lunch counters, beyond the March on Washington and I Have a Dream, beyond Vietnam and beyond our efforts to make of him a myth, beyond where most of us dare to go, even now. He possessed a magnificent religious faith that the beloved community could be accomplished by a bloodless revolution. The weapons of death and their keepers awaited him. Now one with the ancestors, Martin is still bearing witness, calling us, speaking our names, implicating our being, truth making our lives. To care for the sick, the indigent, the forgotten, the abused, the battered, the neglected, the abandoned, and the mistreated, Martin calls us. Out of the midst of viral pandemic and brutal social and racial inequality, Martin calls us. To demand justice for the homeless, the hungry, the ignored, the desperate, the tormented, the fearful, the jobless, the incarcerated, the condemned, the bullied, the disabled, the immigrant, the sexually violated, the emotionally distraught, and the socially and spiritually bereft, Martin calls us. To speak truth to power and in love for Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Elijah McClain. For Tavon Martin, Tatiana Jefferson, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, and Sandra Bland. And for the Black victims of murderous racism everywhere, Martin calls us. There is so much Black death, so much hemorrhaging of life in this, our nation of promise. Martin calls us too, to stand with the courage of our convictions for our siblings who are queer, transgender, questioning, gender non-conforming, and fluid, Latinx, Indigenous, Caucasian, and Asian, Muslims, Hindus, Jews, Sikhs, atheists, and uncertain. Martin calls us to move beyond his many imperfections, and in so doing, move beyond our own, to create an anti-racist, intersectional movement that challenges white supremacy, white privilege, patriarchy, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, heterosexism, discrimination, stigma, and environmental destruction. Martin calls to us this day to rise up as a nation, to live out the true meaning of our creed, to find the strength to love, to give birth to tomorrow today. Martin calls us, we who are the church, to practice what we sing and teach, preach and pray about. In this season of COVID-19, we don't ever want to go back to a time when we couldn't hug or touch or be near one another. We also don't ever want to go back to a world where people are judged by the color of their skin and not the content of their character. As we vaccinate against the virus, may it be our vow no less to end racism, America's original sin. Martin knew that his death was imminent. What his way of life reminds us is what no one in their right mind wants to know. In the pursuit of righteousness, there may be a Memphis, a balcony, a cross, a grave. Few among us will knowingly or willfully choose this way of life. Yet always here and there across the landscape, there are scattered individuals and groups, some prominent, but most largely and unknown, who have dared to accept this way of life. It is a counterintuitive way, where the first are made last and the last first. It is a disruptive way, where the weak are made strong and the victims become victorious. It is a peaceful way, where swords are turned into plowshares, spears are turned into pruning hooks, and war is studied no more. It is a courageous way that causes us to mount up with Harriet Tubman and Tawana Burke and seek justice, to hear Autumn Peltier and Greta Thunberg and not faint, It is a hallowed way that allows us to cling to a harrowing faith, that we shall find a way to live together in this rainbow nation and world and not perish apart as fools. On this Sabbath day and on tomorrow, as a nation, we celebrate Martin's birth, honor his death, and dedicate our lives to repairing our world anew. I close as I began, with words from the poet Herbert Woodward Martin. The dream is dead. The dreamer, is dead. The dream is alive. The pain grows weak. The pain grows less. The tree has not bore all of its fruit. There is still work to be done in the vineyard before sunset, before fruition. Ashe. Amen.